In jazz standards, we deal with a lot of complex harmony, a lot of chord progressions that are cycling around. But even beyond that, when you actually get up to play in a playing situation, oftentimes jazz musicians will substitute the given chord progressions or chords in jazz standards. And so it's important that you know some of the basics, and that's what I'm going to go over. 5 important chord substitutions that you need to know coming right up. Hey, what's up? My name is Brent. I am the jazz musician behind the website learnjazzstandards.com, which is a blog, a podcast, and videos all geared towards helping you become a better jazz musician. If you don't want to miss anything that's going on with this channel, make sure you subscribe at the button below and you'll be locked into everything we have going on here. So like I said, there are a lot of chords that fly by in jazz harmony, and that's a challenge in and of itself, and you need to make sure that you understand what a 2-5-1 chord progression is, a 1-6-2-5, and all these different chord progressions and how they work. That's important, but at the same time, you also have to be aware of situations where jazz musicians will substitute either chords or chord progressions for each other, and so you need to be aware of that happening so that you can hear it when it does happen. So I'm going to go over 5 of them right now. The first chord substitution I want to talk about is when the 3 replaces the 1 chord. Now let's use the key of concert C major just to make things easy for demonstration purposes. We're in the key of C. Let's imagine that we have a 1-6-2-5 chord progression. That's C major 7, A7, D minor 7, G7, right? Now, you see this happen all the time in rhythm changes tunes. You know, like I Got Rhythm, Anthropology, Oleo. Okay, so now what happens oftentimes in this chord progression is the second time through that progression, the 3 chord replaces the 1. Now in diatonic harmony, what is the 3 chord in the key of concert C major? Well, it's E minor 7. So now it's... Okay, so the first time around in rhythm changes, C, A, D, G, then E minor 7. Okay, so you see how that works? Now, why can you substitute the 3 for the 1? Well, there's a lot of chord tones in common with it. There's really nothing that goes outside of that. So therefore, it doesn't really change much other than the bass notes. So you have this different bass note movement. So that's 3 replaces the 1. The next one I want to go over is when the sharp 1 diminished replaces the 6 chord. Now, this is again in the context of a 1-6-2-5 chord progression in the key of concert C. I'm going to be demonstrating this in. Now, what happens often with the 6th chord is it's turned into a dominant 7th chord rather than its diatonic minor 7th functionality that it should be. So instead of A minor, it turns into an A dominant of some sort, resolving to the 2. Now we call that a secondary dominant. That's for another lesson altogether, but it's acting as a secondary dominant. Now when you have a dominant 7th chord, and you can alter that with a flat 9, a sharp 9, a flat 13, you can often substitute it almost every single time with a diminished 7th chord. So in this case, we have C major 7, C sharp diminished 7, D minor 7, G7. Right? So now why does that work? Take a look at this really quick. Here's an A7 flat 9, and here's a C sharp diminished 7. Now, if you really take a good look at this, it shares all of the same notes, except for on that A7 flat 9, it has that bass note of A, which is not present in the C sharp diminished 7. So essentially, it's easy to substitute diminished chords for dominant 7 flat 9 chords because they have all the same tones related to them. So that is sharp 1 diminished replaces the 6. The next chord substitution is tritone substitution. Now, this is really common, and I've done an entire video on this already. I'm going to go ahead and link that up in the card above if you want to check that video out as well. But tritone substitution is pretty simple in concept. Essentially, it's when you substitute a dominant 7th chord for another dominant 7th chord a tritone away. So now this is the most common form of tritone substitution in the context of a 2-5-1 chord progression, which again in the key of concert C major is D minor 7, G7, C major 7. So now what tritone substitution says is that we're going to take that 5 chord and we're going to replace it with another dominant 7th chord, a tritone interval away from it. So instead of G, what's a tritone away from G? D flat. So now I'm going to substitute it. I'm just going to do a D flat 9 in this case. I'm going to substitute with a D flat 9. And this is what it's going to sound like. We have the 2 chord, D minor 7, the tritone sub, which is D flat 7, and then C major 7. Okay, that's the tritone substitution. You'll see that come up a lot, so make sure that you are aware of that and how it works. Now, the 4th chord substitution I want to talk about isn't necessarily something that you have to substitute for something else, but it is what I call a turnaround. Now, turnarounds are anything that gets you back to the 1 chord in some shape or fashion. And in this particular case, it's a 1-4-3-6 turnaround going back to a 2-5-1 chord progression. The 1 is obviously the resolution. So it sounds like this. If we're to continue, 2-5-1. So listen to that again. Right? So that is a 1-4-3-6. Now you notice I have 2 different sets of changes there. Now diatonically speaking, if we're going to be correct, that 4 chord would be a major 7th chord. So C major 7 to F major 7, then E minor 7, this is the 3 chord, and the dominant 6, A7. But you can often substitute that 4 chord for a dominant 7th chord that comes straight out of the blues. So now you have C major 7, F13 or F7, whatever you want to do, E minor 7, and then A7, the 6th chord. Okay, so that's one type of turnaround that you can use, and you can substitute that for many different other turnarounds. So that's just one that I want you to be aware of. The last chord substitution that I want to talk about is what I call chromatic 2-5s. Now, check out this regular 2-5-1 chord progression that we've been talking about in this entire video so far. D minor 7, G7, C major 7. Now, what sometimes jazz musicians will do, they'll either imply it in their solo, or maybe the piano player or guitar player will actually play this, is instead of playing that 2 and that 5 for 1 bar each, they'll replace each bar with short 2-5s, meaning 2 beats each per chord, and it sounds like this. In other words, adding more harmonic movement, in this case, chromatic harmonic movement. So you'll hear this all the time. Musicians will, instead of, outlining that 2-5-1 chord progression in their solo, they'll play something like this. Right? So they'll start by hitting that chromatic 2 chord above. So it's like a 2-5, E flat minor 7, A flat 7, and then chromatic below back to the original 2-5 into C major 7. So that's a chromatic 2-5. Watch out for that. Sometimes you'll even see that built into compositions. So now here's what I want you to answer in the comment section below. What other chord substitutions do you know about? Which other ones do you think people should be aware of? And do you have any tips for approaching them? Let me know in those comments below. And hey, also, if you want to take some of this a little bit further, I do a lot of analyzing harmony in my book, The Jazz Standards Playbook, where I go ahead and analyze 10 important jazz standards, and we go through how to understand them by looking at the Roman numeral analysis and doing improv lessons as well. So if you're interested in that, check out thejazzstandardsplaybook.com. All right, that's all for now. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, and I will see you back in the next video.